This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers, that is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 722, entitled, "Women, don't be depressed by being manless. Just learn some masculism." Description. This flyer points out to women that they don't have to remain depressed due to men ignoring them in huge numbers. Instead, they can learn some masculism, become biconscious, and hence much nicer for men to be with, so are more likely to have and to keep a boyfriend. As biconscious feminists, they will vote with men for the men fairing of the gender laws, reform of the divorce courts, etc., and hence men will be more willing to be fathers again, which will obviously please women and cure them of their depression. Flyer itself. Women, don't be depressed by being manless. Just learn some masculism. By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. When I see hundreds of TikToks made by women who feel lonely and depressed because they don't have a man in their lives, I feel frustrated. I feel that this situation is so avoidable, so due to ignorance and stupidity. Why is it that millions of women today are so lonely and manless? Before trying to solve this problem, one needs to understand how it arose in the first place, so that one understands the source of the problem, hence making it easier to see the solution. So why are so many millions of women alone and depressed? In a word, because of feminism. Monoconscious feminists, in brackets, that is, feminists who have only been exposed to feminist gender politics, who know nothing of masculist ideas, who have been brainwashed by feminism, that gender oppression is a one-way street, that women are the oppressed and men are the oppressors, close brackets, are angry at men for the ways that men oppress women, as taught them by feminism, for example, rape, sexual harassment, domestic violence, patriarchy, misogyny, etc. So feel justified in expressing their anger at men for these gender crimes that men commit against women. Feminists have had a monopoly over gender politics for 6 decades. It's only recently that masculist ideas have arisen. So after 6 decades of this feminist gender political monopoly, it's not surprising that most women have been influenced by the feminist idea that men are oppressors of women, that men are to be viewed by women with suspicion, with distrust, with dislike. Millions of women behave like this towards men, so as is to be expected from men's point of view, such monoconscious feministed women are not agreeable to be with. So increasingly over the past decade now, young men particularly are avoiding young women, having the attitude that they do not want to have anything to do with a woman who is a, quote, misandrist, male-dumping, feminazi cunt, end quote, and leaves her rotting on the shelf. In the US today, 2/3 of young men don't even date young women, claiming that young women are, quote, undateable due to being, quote, too poisoned by feminism. A reputable opinion polling company by the name of Pew, P-E-W, Research Center found in 2022 that 63%, that's nearly 2/3, of young men between 18 and 30 didn't even date young women. When asked why, these young men expressed the above opinion. As a consequence of this dating strike, on the part of young US men, millions of young US women are being ignored by young men, are not going on dates with young men, so are feeling manless and hence loveless, sexless, babyless, and utterly miserable. Young women are now expressing their frustration and depression at being manless in large numbers on the internet, especially on TikTok, with video after video of young women asking themselves, quote, "Why are men not approaching us anymore?" And "Why are men ignoring us?" The answer to this question should be obvious from the above, and that is that monoconscious feminism has made young women a pain in the ass to be with for young men. This situation has got so bad that young men in the US have wiped their hands of young women, preferring to spend their time on their own rather than having to confront the monoconscious feminist attitude that men are the oppressors of women and hence are to be distrusted, not to be liked by women. Young men are not masochists. They much prefer to be with women who like men, who are nurturative towards men. But the supply of such women is drying up as monoconscious feminism penetrates ever deeper into the psyches of millions of women. At the present time, relations between the sexes are at a low ebb, with men avoiding women and women being misandrist towards men, thanks to these women's monoconscious feminist beliefs. In my view, this poverty of male-female connection is also avoidable and dumb, which brings me to the title of this flyer. The solution to this problem is quite simple in my view, and that is merely to teach women some masculism. Once most women are as well informed of masculist ideas as they are of feminist ideas, then the disconnect between the sexes will evaporate. Why do I think this? As explained above, monoconscious feminists tend to be rather feminazi bitchy because feminism teaches them that gender oppression is a one-way street. When a monoconscious feminist starts learning some masculist ideas, her gender political horizons are expanded. She starts to realize that gender oppression is a two-way street, that is, that women oppress men too. Once she becomes exposed to the big three of the masculists, that is, the worst three ways that women oppress men, brackets, that is, women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, and women's forced fathering, close brackets, then it dawns on her that in reality, women oppress men far worse, since the big three are horrible gender crimes that women commit against men that last decades, making them a lot more serious than the relatively minor ways that men oppress women. Once this former monoconscious feminist starts seeing that in fact women oppress men worse than vice versa, her next revelation is that from the point of view of a biconscious masculist, in brackets, biconsciousness equals being as familiar with masculist ideas as feminist ideas, being aware that gender oppression is a two-way street, with women oppressing men worse than vice versa, close brackets. The public trashing of men by monoconscious feminists is deeply hypocritical, given that women oppress men far worse. This newly biconscious feminist then tells herself that she does not want to be seen by biconscious masculists, in brackets, who in time will be most men, as masculist ideas continue to spread across the planet, close brackets, as a hypocritical bigot. So she becomes a lot nicer for men to be with, since she loses her monoconscious feminazi bitchiness towards men, seeing that women oppress men too. So it would be hypocritical of her to trash men in public when she knows that women oppress men far worse. In other words, she has had her monoconscious anger at men for the ways that men oppress women, cancelled, in capitals, by her biconscious feminist anger at women for the ways that women oppress men. By becoming a lot less feminazi bitchy towards men, she becomes nicer for men to be with. So she will then be a lot more likely to attract and keep, in capital letters, a boyfriend, which will solve her loneliness problem. The more informed she becomes of Masculist ideas, the more likely she will sympathise with the political goals of the Masculists, who have a whole program of political reforms that Masculists want to see implemented by society, by the law, by parliaments, to liberate millions, later billions of men. For example, Masculists want the fipping of women, that is, socialising and educating young women to be FIPs, in brackets, FIP, that's F-I-P, equals financially independent person, close brackets, by getting a career competent education so that women as adults are not fluffies, brackets, fluffy equals traditional woman who expects to parasite off the money and labour of a man for decades, thus manslaving him, and for one father in 4 divorce raping him and ruining his life, close brackets. So that men are not man-slaves to fluffies, thus liberating men to devote their time and energy more to their own dreams rather than working for decades for a parasitic, fluffy female. Masculists want the biconsciousing of society so that everyone is familiar with both feminist and masculist ideas, so that monoconscious feminism dies out, replaced by a more civilized bi-consciousness. Masculists want the divorce courts to be thoroughly reformed, basing them on the principle of financial independence of both divorcing parties, that is, the divorcing mother is assumed to be a FIP, so that alimony is thrown out. So too with the halving of wealth and stuff. Custody of children is made joint by default. Divorcing FIP women can take care of themselves financially and not expect, fluffy style, to continue parasiting off a man after the divorce the way she was before the divorce. Masculists are abolitionists, so see fluffies and fluffy feminists as manslaving, divorce-raping vermin to be exterminated by being totally ignored, not even pumped and dumped. Fluffies are the enemy of the Masculists, who are at war against them, who want to see fluffydom die out, to be replaced by a general bi-consciousness and the fipping of women. Masculists want the creation of GECs, G-E-Cs, that's brackets, gender equality committees, in the parliaments that consist half of female feminist politicians and half of male masculist politicians, so that the gender issues of both sexes are dealt with equally, which is far from being the case today in today's gynocentric society, in brackets, gender politically speaking, close brackets. The masculist half of these GECs will then legislate 2 fundamental laws that will liberate millions of men, namely the PARA, that's P-A-R-E-R, in brackets, paternity rejection right, and the OPTAB, O-P-T-A-B, that's obligatory paternity testing at birth for all births. Women have the MARA, but men don't yet have the PARA. Women thus have the legal right to reject an unwanted pregnancy that could ruin their lives, but men have no such equivalent right, so millions of women force men into an unwanted pregnancy, thus manslaving him for 2 decades to pay for a kid he never wanted in the first place. This is what the Masculists refer to as forced fathering. Masculists want women who commit paternity fraud, in brackets, where the woman lies to her man that the kid growing in her is his when she knows it's not, close brackets, to be put in jail for 15 years for a greater gender crime against men than rape against women. That usually gets a man a 10-year jail sentence. The Masculist half of these GECs will foster the teaching of men's studies in the universities, the spreading of Masculist ideas in the media, the high schools, the universities, etc. biconscious feminist women would be a lot more sympathetic towards Masculist political goals than monoconscious feminists, who are usually opposed to Masculist legislation. It's therefore expected that when most women are biconscious, then a fair proportion of them will then vote, in capital letters, with men for the establishment of the GECs in the parliaments, so that men are liberated from the awful gender crimes committed by women against men, for example, the Big Three. When marriage is no longer toxic for men, as it is today in today's fluffy feminist-controlled divorce court system, where one father in 4 is butchered and has his life destroyed in these hated feminist-controlled divorce courts, then men will be a lot more likely to be fathers again, which obviously will make women a lot happier. With most women biconscious, the awful misandry of the monoconscious feminists will die out, being replaced by a more civilized biconsciousness. Men will be a lot more willing to have relationships with women as a result, so that there will be much less loneliness amongst women, since many more men will be prepared to have a woman in their lives than is the case today. From the above, it should be clear that if women want to solve the dating disconnect problem with men, then all they have to do is learn some masculism, hence become biconscious, and hence become less hypocritical and a lot nicer for men to be with. The nicer that women become to men, the more likely men are to be nice to them. Everyone benefits, a win-win situation. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. In brackets, click on the